The room buzzed with voices and the clatter of silverware on fine china. It was Thanksgiving dinner, and as usual, it felt like the grandest of events. The long dining table was perfectly set with all the traditional dishes: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and a selection of pies to end the meal. But despite the outward celebration, I could feel a growing unease in my stomach. I glanced around, taking in the familiar faces that I had seen countless times. Adam, my husband, sat at the head of the table, his face lit up by the soft glow of the chandelier above. To my right, my sister-in-law, Sandra, chatted with Adam's brother. The rest of the family laughed and conversed freely, and for a moment, I almost felt like I belonged. But then, something caught my eye: the chair. It was an old wooden chair, placed at the far end of the table, positioned almost out of sight from everyone. I had seen it many times before, a chair that always seemed to be reserved for me when I was part of the family gatherings. But tonight, it felt different. The chair wasn't just any chair, it was the chair where I had been told to sit since the beginning of my marriage to Adam, the chair where I was expected to wait, unnoticed and unimportant. The air in the room shifted, but no one else seemed to notice. I, however, couldn't ignore the familiar sting of being pushed to the periphery. It wasn't the first time I had felt like an outsider in my own home, but tonight was different. Elaine, my mother-in-law, looked at me with her icy eyes. She smiled, but it was a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, dear," she said, as if speaking to a child, "you'll need to sit here tonight." Her voice was as sweet as honey, but there was a subtle edge to it. "This chair is perfect for you." I nodded, feeling the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't protest. I walked to the chair and sat down, trying to keep my composure. But as soon as I settled in, I knew what was happening. It was the same thing every year. The subtle exclusion, the unspoken message that I was different, that I didn't quite belong in their world. Dinner continued as usual, but it was hard to ignore the silent treatment. My conversation was interrupted, my opinions dismissed, and I found myself retreating into the background as everyone else continued with their cheerful chatter. The longer I sat there, the more I realized that this was how it always would be. I wasn't part of their inner circle, and it seemed that no matter how hard I tried to fit in, I was never going to be good enough. But then, something unexpected happened. Adam's phone buzzed on the table, and he glanced at it briefly before turning away. His face tightened for a moment, but he quickly masked his expression and returned to the conversation, as though nothing had happened. It was a small gesture, but it didn't go unnoticed by me. I felt a pang of anxiety twist in my stomach. What had happened? What was Adam hiding? Elaine must have sensed the shift in the room because she leaned in with her usual practiced smile. "You're doing so well at work lately, aren't you, dear?" she asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "It must be such a challenge for you, balancing work with all your duties at home." Her words stung more than she realized. It was always the same, a quiet, underhanded critique, as though my career was a burden, a distraction from my real responsibilities. I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. "It's been great," I said through clenched teeth. "It's a lot of work, but I enjoy it." Elaine's smile widened, and Sandra chimed in from across the table. "I can't imagine how you do it," she said sweetly, though her words were dipped in venom. "Managing everything and still looking after the family. That's not easy." The implication was clear: she didn't believe I was doing enough. It felt like a slap in the face, but I refused to let them see how much it hurt. Just then, my son, Noah, walked in with a serious look on his face. He was only 16, but there was a maturity about him that I always admired. But tonight, as he approached the table, there was something else in his eyes, something that made my heart skip a beat. "Mom," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you." I stood up, leaving my chair behind, and followed Noah out of the room. The rest of the family didn't even glance in our direction as we walked away. No one cared to notice. As soon as we were out of earshot, Noah turned to me, his face filled with concern. "Mom," he began, "there's something you need to know. I've been talking to someone about all of this. You don't have to put up with it anymore." Before I could ask him what he meant, a lawyer stepped forward from behind Noah. He was a tall man, dressed in a suit that made him look incredibly formal, but there was something about his presence that commanded attention. "I'm here on behalf of your son," the lawyer said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to discuss the treatment you've been enduring. It's time to take action." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt like the world had just shifted under my feet. I had no idea what to say. The family, the chair, The years of quietly enduring their disrespect, all of it suddenly felt irrelevant. Noah's words, spoken so matter-of-factly, hit me harder than anything anyone at the table could have said. He was standing up for me, in the only way he knew how. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to accept their treatment anymore. The table, the chair, and all the years of exclusion suddenly felt like they didn't matter. Noah had just given me the strength to fight back. The lawyer's presence felt like an invisible weight pressing down on me, but I couldn't deny the sense of relief that began to settle over me. It was as if I had spent years holding my breath, and now, finally, I could exhale. "Mom, I know this isn't easy," Noah said softly, his hand resting on my shoulder. "But we've been talking about it for a while. We don't have to let them treat you this way." I looked at him, struggling to find the words. My son, my sweet, thoughtful son, had always been a source of strength for me, but this was new. This was unexpected. For years, I had been the one shielding him, protecting him from the harsh realities of our family. But now, he was the one trying to protect me. The lawyer cleared his throat, drawing my attention. He wasn't just any lawyer, he was someone Noah had sought out on his own. A professional, yes, but also a symbol of something bigger, change. "I'm Mr. Barnes," he introduced himself. "And I've been made aware of the ongoing situation at your family gatherings. It's clear that you've been enduring emotional mistreatment for far too long. We're here to discuss your options moving forward." I didn't know what to say. The words were right there, but they felt foreign in my mouth. I had been so used to swallowing my anger, my hurt, that I couldn't remember the last time I had spoken up about any of it. To hear someone else acknowledge it out loud made it all feel so real. "Mom," Noah said, his voice firm but caring, "you deserve respect. You deserve to be treated like an equal, not some afterthought. This isn't normal. I don't care how long it's been going on. It's wrong." I nodded, fighting back tears. This was everything I had wanted to say for years, but never had the courage to voice. Now, with Noah by my side and a lawyer standing in front of me, I knew that it wasn't too late. It wasn't too late to stand up for myself. "Mr. Barnes," I said, my voice shaking, What can we do?" Mr. Barnes smiled reassuringly. "There are several options available, but first and foremost, I'd suggest documenting the incidents. It might seem small, but every instance of mistreatment matters. We can file for mediation, or if necessary, legal action to ensure that you're treated fairly." Mediation. The word echoed in my mind. It was so simple, so practical, yet it felt like the start of something much bigger. I could take action. I didn't have to accept being sidelined anymore. For years, I had been a passive participant in my own life, allowing Adam's family to dictate my worth. But not anymore. Now, I had a voice. Noah's eyes shone with determination. "We're not doing this for revenge," he said, his voice calm yet strong. "We just want what's fair. For you." I didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. I wanted to collapse into his arms and thank him for being the one person who truly saw me. But instead, I stood there, feeling the weight of it all slowly begin to lift. Maybe this was the first step. Maybe, for the first time, I didn't have to keep my pain to myself. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Adam. He stepped out of the dining room, his face flushed, but there was something else in his eyes, concern? Or was it guilt? I couldn't tell. I had spent so long trying to interpret his moods, his actions, but today felt different. Today, I wasn't going to let him control the narrative. "Is everything okay?" Adam asked, his voice laced with false concern. I turned to face him. "No, Adam. Everything is not okay." The words were out before I could stop them, and the surprise on his face was unmistakable. He took a step toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "No, we're done pretending," I continued, my voice growing steadier with each word. "You can't keep treating me like I'm invisible. You can't keep letting your family treat me like I'm nothing." Adam's face twisted with frustration. "What are you talking about? You've been part of this family for years. I don't understand." The anger in his voice was rising, but I was done with the silence, done with the suffocating atmosphere that had followed me for so long. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but it wasn't fear or sadness, it was strength. "You never saw me, Adam," I said, my voice breaking, but my resolve firm. "I was never more than the help to you and your family. Always there, but never truly part of the family." Adam's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, I thought he might argue. But then he seemed to deflate, the weight of my words sinking in. "You don't mean that," he said quietly, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. "We've been through so much together." "And what about me, Adam?" I shot back. "What about everything I've done for this family? Did you ever think about me for once?" The silence between us was thick, suffocating, but in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for Adam's approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for his validation. Noah stepped forward, placing a hand on my back. "We don't need you to fix this, Dad," he said. "We just need you to see it for what it is. And if you can't, then maybe we'll find another way." Adam's face turned pale, but he said nothing. For a long moment, the room was filled with a heavy silence, one that felt different from the usual tension. This time, it was because I had spoken up. This time, it was because I wasn't willing to stay silent anymore. "I think that's enough for now," Mr. Barnes interjected, sensing the tension in the air. "We'll be in touch soon." As the lawyer and Noah turned to leave, I stayed behind, staring at Adam. He didn't say a word, but I could see the cracks beginning to form in the facade he had put up for years. It wasn't over yet, but something had changed. Something had shifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally starting to take control of my own life. And it was only the beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. The conversation with Adam had left an unexpected tension in the air, and though he hadn't said much, I could see the conflict in his eyes. It was like a part of him wanted to argue, to defend the way his family had treated me. But another part of him, a deeper, quieter part, seemed to understand. As for me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Finally, I had taken a stand. I had done something I never thought I was capable of, something I had always been too afraid to do. But now that I had, there was no going back. Noah and I spent hours talking over the next few days. He was my rock, my unwavering support. Each time I started to doubt myself, he reminded me of the importance of what I was doing. He told me that I deserved more, that I was worthy of respect. And for the first time in a long time, I actually started to believe him. The phone calls from my family started coming in. It wasn't just Adam anymore, it was everyone. Aunt Sandra, my sister-in-law Mary, even my mother-in-law who rarely spoke to me outside of family gatherings. They all wanted to know what was going on, to make sense of what had happened. I could tell they were shocked, maybe even a little scared. I didn't answer at first. I wasn't ready to engage with them. They had never seen me as anything other than what they wanted me to be. But now? Now things were different. It was Noah who finally convinced me to take the call from Aunt Sandra. I'd always had a soft spot for her, though she, like the others, had never truly seen me. Still, I wasn't about to let the family sweep everything under the rug. "Aunt Sandra," I said, my voice steady, "I think we need to have a real conversation. A real one, not one where I'm just expected to smile and nod." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her processing my words. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's talk." The conversation that followed was one I had dreaded for years. Aunt Sandra was always the one who had kept her distance, never fully taking sides, always giving her opinion but never really standing up for me. She was the one who, when I was left out, would say, "Well, maybe next time, dear," in a tone that suggested it wasn't a big deal. But it had always been a big deal to me. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let her pretend it wasn't. "Aunt Sandra," I began, "I've been a part of this family for a long time. I've given everything, sacrificed everything for the sake of everyone else. But what have I gotten in return? Disrespect, exclusion, and neglect." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the phone. Aunt Sandra didn't say anything at first. And then, finally, she spoke. "I never meant for you to feel that way," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I really am. I always thought you were content. I thought you were fine." "Content?" I echoed, my voice rising slightly. "You thought I was fine? You never asked, Sandra. No one ever asked. You just assumed." She sighed. "I can see that now. But I didn't know. I didn't know how to help. How could I have helped? I wasn't sure how to respond. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, so many years wishing someone would step up and notice my pain. But it had never happened. And now, I wasn't sure how to make it happen." "It's not about asking for help anymore," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's about recognizing that I deserve to be treated with respect. It's about realizing that I'm not just here to serve everyone else, to be the silent, obedient wife and daughter-in-law. I'm a person. And I have needs, too. The silence stretched between us again, but this time, it didn't feel as suffocating. It felt like the air was clearing, like the fog that had hung over me for so long was finally beginning to lift. I can't change the past, Aunt Sandra said finally, her voice thick with emotion. But I can start doing better now. I can listen. I can see you. I want to be part of making things right, if you'll let me. The words were a balm to my weary soul. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was finally seeing me, not as a placeholder in the family, not as a background character, but as a person with my own worth, my own voice. I don't know what this is going to look like, Sandra, I said, my voice quieter now. But I need to know that I won't have to keep fighting for recognition. I need to know that I matter. You matter, she said, and there was no hesitation in her voice. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. I hung up the phone feeling strangely relieved. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. I had made the first real step in claiming my place in this family. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore, and neither was Noah. But as much as I had hoped that Aunt Sandra's apology would be the turning point, there was still a part of me that couldn't help but wonder about Adam. His silence over the past few days had weighed heavily on me. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't said a word since our confrontation. And that left a part of me unsettled. I couldn't ignore the fact that there were still deep wounds between us, wounds that no amount of good intentions or apologies could easily heal. I had spent so many years walking on eggshells, afraid to upset the fragile balance of our marriage, but now I realized that balance had been a lie. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter how painful it was. But the question remained, would Adam be able to face it? Or would he continue to hide behind his family's expectations? As I sat in the quiet of our living room, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened next, I knew I was no longer alone in this fight. Noah and I had each other. And for the first time, that was enough. The weeks that followed were a test of patience and resilience. I had finally spoken up. I had finally made my stand. But despite Aunt Sandra's apology, there was a lingering unease between Adam and me. The silence between us had grown louder, suffocating in its weight. I could feel him distancing himself, almost as if he were retreating into a world that no longer included me. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to push him any further. I was scared of what the next confrontation would bring. I had always prided myself on being the calm one, the peacemaker who avoided conflict at all costs. But after everything, after years of being overlooked, dismissed, and unseen, I realized I couldn't hide from the truth any longer. It was clear that something had to change, even if it meant risking everything. It was one night, after dinner, when the tension in the air became unbearable. I was cleaning up the dishes, Noah sitting nearby reading a book. Adam hadn't said much all evening. He had barely touched his food and had spent most of the evening scrolling through his phone, his face unreadable. I could feel the anger building inside of me, but I kept my composure. I wasn't about to let this slip away. Not again. Adam, I said softly, but there was a firmness in my voice. We need to talk. He didn't look up from his phone. I'm not in the mood, Sarah, he muttered, his tone flat. I took a deep breath, trying to control the frustration that was bubbling up. We need to talk about everything, I continued, the words coming out slower now, with more weight. About how things have been. And how they're going to be from now on. He put his phone down, the quiet click of it hitting the table cutting through the room. I could feel his gaze on me, and for the first time in weeks, I met his eyes without looking away. There was something in them, a mixture of guilt, frustration, and uncertainty, but there was also a hint of fear. Fear that I might say something he wasn't ready to hear. Sarah, what do you want me to say? He asked, his voice tinged with exasperation. I don't know what you expect from me. I took a step closer to him, the distance between us suddenly feeling vast. I expect you to see me. I expect you to finally hear what I'm saying, Adam. I've been saying this for years, and you just ignore it. But it's not just about me anymore. It's about us. Our marriage. Our future. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes clouded with frustration. I'm trying, okay? But every time I try, it feels like I'm making things worse. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the way my family. Don't you dare. I interrupted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. My voice rose, sharper than I intended. Don't you dare bring your family into this again. This has nothing to do with them. This is about us, Adam. It's always been about us. There was a long pause as the words hung between us. He didn't respond immediately, and I took advantage of the silence to gather my thoughts. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter, I continued, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. Tired of pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I need you to hear me. I need you to see that I've been here, right here, by your side, through everything. And yet, I've always been the one to carry the weight. I've always been the one who has to compromise, to bend, to make things work. And I'm done. I could see his face soften, a flicker of realization crossing his features. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase the years of silence, the years of neglect. I needed more than an apology. I needed a change. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered, the words heavy with guilt. I don't know if I can. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Then we need to figure it out together. No more hiding, no more pretending. If we're going to move forward, we need to do it as equals. And I need you to understand that I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself for the sake of everyone else's happiness. The air between us felt charged, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in Adam's eyes that I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. Real, raw vulnerability. It was as if he was finally beginning to see the weight I had carried all this time, the weight of being invisible, the weight of being overlooked. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I never realized how much I was asking you to carry. I could feel the walls inside me begin to crack, the cold armor I had built around my heart starting to thaw. It wasn't an easy apology. It wasn't a perfect apology. But it was a start. I can't promise I'll change overnight, he continued, his voice hesitant. But I'll try. I'll do better. I want us to be better, Sarah. I really do. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't some perfect resolution. But it was the first step towards something real, something tangible. We'll figure it out, I said softly. Together. He nodded, his hand reaching out for mine. For the first time in months, it felt like we were in sync, like we were both finally on the same page. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy. But it was a beginning that I had longed for. As I stood there, holding his hand, I knew that we had a long road ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't walking it alone. Together, Adam and I were ready to face whatever came next. The weeks following our conversation were a mix of small victories and setbacks. We both tried, in our own ways, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered over time. Adam, for the first time, began making an effort to be present, really present. He asked about my day, listened when I spoke, and, most importantly, acknowledged the emotional load I had carried for so long. It wasn't perfect. Far from it. But it was progress. For me, it was the beginning of learning how to trust again. Learning how to believe that Adam could change. But more importantly, it was about learning to trust myself, to trust that I had the strength to stand up for what I needed, to fight for my own happiness, no matter the cost. There were moments when I doubted, when the familiar patterns of silence crept back into our relationship. But each time, I would remind myself of how far we'd come. How much we had talked, how much we had uncovered. I wasn't going to let those old ghosts haunt us anymore. I couldn't. And then, one evening, everything came full circle. It was a Saturday night, and we were sitting in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. Adam was reading a book, Noah was drawing on the coffee table, and I was flipping through an old photo album. The room felt calm, familiar. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that undercurrent of tension, that heavy weight pressing down on me. Noah looked up from his drawing and smiled. "Mom, look at this." He held up a picture he'd drawn of our family, of Adam, Noah, and me, standing hand in hand, smiling together. It was simple, but it was beautiful. I smiled back, my heart swelling. "That's amazing, Noah. I love it." Adam looked up too, his eyes softening as he glanced at the drawing. For a moment, we all just sat there, in the quiet of the evening, appreciating the peace that had finally settled between us. It wasn't a perfect peace, but it was ours. After a moment, Adam spoke up. "I've been thinking about something," he said, setting his book aside. "About how much I've taken for granted over the years. About how much you've sacrificed, Sarah. And I want to make it up to you." I raised an eyebrow, wondering where this was going. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then smiled, a little sheepish. "Well, I was thinking, maybe it's time we start doing things a little differently. You and me. Not just as partners in this marriage, but as individuals too. You deserve to have your own space, your own time. I want to support you in that. Maybe even take a little more of the load off your shoulders." I couldn't help but feel a mixture of surprise and relief. Adam had always been a good husband, but this was different. This was a recognition of everything I had been telling him, everything I had been feeling for so long. "That would be nice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Noah, ever the curious one, piped up. "What about me? Can I help too?" I laughed, my heart lightening. "Of course, buddy. You can help too." Adam chuckled as well, his eyes softening as he looked at me. "It's not going to be perfect. But I'm willing to try, if you are." For the first time in a long time, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping changes. It was about the small, consistent efforts, the conversations, the actions, the little moments of connection. And that was enough. Over time, we found our new rhythm. Adam took on more responsibilities at home, Noah's laughter became a constant soundtrack in our house, and I started carving out time for myself again. Time to do the things I loved, time to rediscover who I was outside of being a wife and mother. It wasn't always easy, but it was freeing. It was healing. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, of not losing myself in the process of being everything to everyone. And while I still had moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether I had made the right decision, I knew deep down that I had done what was necessary for me. For my peace of mind. For my happiness. And as for Adam, he wasn't perfect, but he was trying. That was enough. We had come a long way from the silence that had once defined us. We were rebuilding, not just our marriage, but our trust in each other, our ability to communicate, and most importantly, our ability to be vulnerable with each other. As time went on, the painful memories of our struggles became more distant. We had weathered the storm, and in doing so, we had created something stronger in its wake. Our relationship was no longer defined by resentment or bitterness. It was defined by love, love that had been tested, but never broken. And with that, I knew we were ready for whatever the future held. As we sat together that night, Noah's drawing still on the table, Adam's hand resting gently in mine, I realized that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. And sometimes, the most important victories come not from grand gestures, but from the quiet moments when we finally choose to stand together. With that, our journey wasn't over, it was only just beginning.